So this is our Arduino code. We got 2 sensors and 2 motors set up to it. At the start of it, we set up our light value so that way we can read it using if statements. We also set up the library so that way we could read the temperature sensor and make sure that it's connected to the right pin. In the setup function, we set up the pins for the light sensor and the motors, for the Grater motor and the push motor. We also make sure to use the serial.begin so we could read the debug log, which we use later here to make sure that everything's working correctly, and then we start the temperature sensor. At the beginning of the loop, we make sure that everything's set to Fahrenheit so we can read it correctly, and then after that, we check to see if the temperature sensor is actually working. If not, it prints this debug log right here, failed to read from the temperature sensor. And then we make sure that it computes the heat index in Fahrenheit and not Celsius. And then we print all of that right here. In the light sensor, we also read to make sure that it's connected to the right pin and is reading the right values. And then we print the value and we print it with the words light value so we understand it. And then in the temperature sensor loop, we check to see if everything's under 100 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit or equal to, then what we do is we stop everything. And then if it reads under 100 degrees Fahrenheit, it continues as planned. Then it checks to see if the light is over 500. And if it's greater than 500, then what it does is it stops the Grater motor and it pushes the push motor back up, so that way we don't have to reset it physically or anything. It all does it automatically. And it waits 5,000 milliseconds or about 5 seconds, so that way the push can go all the way up and continue as planned if you need to reuse it. And then if the light is less than 500 or equal to 500, then what it does is it pushes the motor down, the push motor, and then it turns the Grater motor so that way we can start grating the food and pushing it down at the same time, so that way it's working effectively.
This is our final project. We're making a cheese grater, and we got one motor here, one motor here. We got our temperature sensor right here, and then we have our light sensor connected to the breadboard. And here's our code, and once we connect it, we see that this motor, which will be connected to the push part, is spinning, and so is, it's kind of hard to see, so is this motor. It's spinning, and then once you want to like shine the light on the sensor, and then once the light is shined onto the sensor, now that motor is stopped. You can see the gears aren't moving at all, and then this one flipped directions. So let's see the light for this one. We might need more light. Now it stops and then flips directions.
It's pretty hard to tell on camera, but it does.
Yeah, and that's what the paper's kind of trying to show. And then we don't have a lighter or anything to heat this up to over 100 degrees, but if the temperature sensor were to go above 100 degrees, it would stop. And in our code, we have the serial monitor. It says the temperature of what it reads, so 720.62 degrees Fahrenheit. And if that were to go over 100, all the motors and all the processes would just stop. And so yeah, and our light sensor reads there, so if we cover and uncover that, that's how these two motors flip on and off. To go a little more close to the Arduino, we have the pins 7 and 8 connected to the motor for the Grater part. This is the bottom part of our component, and then this motor will be connected to the push part, and these are connected to pins 12 and 13. And then we have a ground pin going from the light sensor on the breadboard right here is connected to the resistor, and the resistor is connected to this ground wire. And then we have this wire running from the 5-volt to this plus side, which is connected to both the temperature sensor, this green wire, and also the light sensor, this black wire. And then we have this purple wire running from the ground to the ground for the temperature sensor, as well as this green one for power. And those are all the wires connected to the motors and sensor parts.